can the mind really heal the body? And if so, is there any scientific evidence to convince skeptical physicians like me? These are the questions that fueled the last few years of my research. And what I discovered is that the scientific community, the medical establishment, has been proving for over 50 years that the mind can heal the body. We call it the placebo effect. And we've been trying to outsmart it for decades. The placebo effect is a thorn in the side of the medical establishment. It's an inconvenient truth that gets in between trying to bring new treatments, new surgeries into the medical establishment. So it's a problem, supposedly. But I actually think this is really good news. The placebo effect is excellent news because it's concrete evidence that the body holds within it innate self-repair mechanisms that can make unthinkable things happen to the body. So if you find this surprising, if you have a hard time believing that the body can heal itself, you need look no further than the Spontaneous Remission Project, a database compiled by the Institute of Noetic Sciences of over 3,500 case studies in the medical literature of patients who have gotten better from seemingly incurable illnesses. You think there's such a thing as an incurable illness? I swear, if you go look at this database, it'll blow your mind. Everything's in there. Stage 4 cancers that disappeared without treatment. HIV-positive patients that became HIV negative. Heart disease, kidney failure, diabetes, high blood pressure, thyroid disease, autoimmune diseases, gone. A great example of this in the medical literature is a case study from 1957 of Mr. Wright, who had advanced lymphosarcoma. So things weren't going well for Mr. Wright. Time was really running out. He had tumors the size of oranges in his armpits, his neck, his chest, his abdomen, his liver and his spleen were enlarged, and his lungs were filling up with 2 quarts of milky fluid every day that had to be drained in order for him to breathe. But Mr. Wright wasn't giving up hope. He had heard about this wonder drug called Krebiozin, and he was begging his doctor, come on, just give me some of that Krebiozin, it's all going to be good. Now, unfortunately, the Krebiozin was only available on a research protocol, and the protocol required that the doctor be able to make an assessment that says that this guy has at least 3 months to live. And his doctor, Dr. West, just couldn't do that. But Mr. Wright was tenacious, and he didn't give up. He kept badgering his doctor, until finally his doctor was like, okay, fine, I'll give you the Krebiozin. So he dosed him up on a Friday, not expecting that Mr. Wright would make it through the weekend. But to his utter shock, when Dr. West came in to do rounds on Monday, Mr. Wright was up walking around the wards, and his tumors had shrunk to half their original size. They had melted like snowballs on a hot stove, and 10 days after getting the Krebiozin, they were gone. So Mr. Wright was up rocking and rolling, like praising Krebiozin as the miracle drug he believed it to be, for 2 months, until the initial reports came out about Krebiozin that said that it didn't really look like Krebiozin was working so well. And Mr. Wright fell into a deep depression, and his cancer came back. So this time, Dr. West decided to get sneaky, and he told his patient that, you know, that Krebiozin that you got, that was a tainted version, really not so good. But I got us some ultra-pure, highly concentrated Krebiozin. This stuff's got it going on. He then injected Mr. Wright with nothing but distilled water. And once again, the tumors disappeared, the fluid in his lungs went away. Mr. Wright was up rocking and rolling for another 2 months. And then the American Medical Association blew it by publishing a nationwide study that proved definitively Krebiozin was worthless. 2 days later, Mr. Wright, after hearing this news, died. Soon after that, I came across another study in the medical literature that was the stuff of fairy tales. 3 baby girls were born, delivered by a midwife on Friday the 13th in the Okefenokee Swamp near the Georgia-Florida border. And the midwife pronounced that these 3 babies born on such a fateful day were all hexed. The first, she said, would die before her 16th birthday. The second, before her 21st. The third, before her 23rd birthday. And as it turned out, the first girl died the day before her 16th birthday. The second died the day before her 21st birthday. And the third girl, who knew what had happened to the other 2, got wind of that. On the day before her 23rd birthday, she showed up at the hospital hyperventilating, begging them to make sure she survived. She wound up dying that night. So these 2 case studies are great examples from the medical literature of the placebo effect and its opposite, the nocebo effect. So Mr. Wright, when he got that distilled water and his tumors melted away, that's a great example of the placebo effect, when you get a seemingly inert treatment, and yet something is happening physiologically in the body such that disease goes away. The nocebo effect is the opposite. So the 3 hexed girls are an example of the nocebo effect, when the mind's belief that something bad is going to happen in the body then comes to manifest. So the scientific literature, the medical journals like the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association, these scientific journals are full of evidence that the placebo effect and the nocebo effect are incredibly powerful. We've known this since the 1950s, and we've seen countless case studies that show that in almost everything you study, if you give people a fake treatment, a sugar pill, a saline injection, or most effectively, a fake surgery, 18 to 80% of the time, people get better. And it's not just in their mind. That's what I thought in the beginning, like, oh, they're just feeling better, they're thinking better. But it's not, it's actually in their physiology. This is measurable. You can actually see what happens to the body. So, for example, patients getting placebos were found to have ulcers that healed, colons that became less inflamed, bronchi that dilated, warts that disappeared. Cells looked different under the microscope. It's provable. It's happening in the body, even though it's initiated by the mind. So when you look at these, some of the studies are just amazing. I love the Rogaine study. So, you get a bunch of bald men, you give them placebos, they grow hair. The opposite is also true. So if you give people a placebo and you tell them it's chemotherapy, they vomit and they lose their hair. So this is really happening in the body. The body can heal itself. The body has these innate natural self-repair mechanisms. So every time your doctor tells you you have an incurable illness, you're going to have to take that medication for the rest of your life. Or God forbid you get cancer and they say you've got a 5% 5-year survival rate. It's really no different than when that midwife told those 3 baby girls that they were hexed. It's a form of medical hexing that's so prevalent. These things are all great and critical and important. But I also came to believe that we need healthy relationships, a healthy professional life, a healthy creative life, a healthy spiritual life, a healthy sex life, a healthy financial life, a healthy environment. So how does this happen? What's happening in the brain that's making the body change? This was what was fascinating to me. What I found is that the brain communicates with all the cells in the body via hormones and neurotransmitters. So for example, if you have a negative thought, belief, or feeling in the brain, your brain triggers this as a threat. Something's wrong. If you feel lonely or pessimistic, things are bad at work, you're in a toxic relationship, the amygdala says, threat, threat, threat. And it turns on the hypothalamus that talks to the pituitary gland, that communicates with the adrenal gland, and the adrenal gland starts spitting out stress hormones like cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine. It turns on what Walter Cannon at Harvard called the stress response, that triggers the the sympathetic nervous system, and puts you into that fight or flight mode, which is adaptive, it's protective if you're running away from a mountain lion, But fortunately, there's a counterbalancing relaxation response that Herbert Benson at Harvard described. And when this comes about, the stress response turns off, the parasympathetic nervous system turns on, and healing hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, nitric oxide, endorphins fill the body and bathe every cell in the body. What I found the most amazing about this is that those natural self-repair mechanisms that we all have, they only flip on when the nervous system is relaxed. So when you're having stress responses, that all those natural self-repair mechanisms get flipped on. So when you're going to get supposedly maybe a new wonder drug, you don't know whether you're getting the placebo or not, it triggers that relaxation response. That combination of the mind's positive belief and the nurturing care of a healthcare provider relaxes the nervous system. And then all those natural self-repair mechanisms can come into play. Fortunately, though, you don't have to be in a clinical trial to turn on your relaxation responses. There are lots of simple, pleasurable activities that turn on the relaxation responses, and these have been proven in the medical literature. So you can meditate. You can express yourself creatively. You can get a massage, do yoga or Tai Chi. You can go out with your friends. You can do work that you love. You can have sex. You can laugh. You can exercise. You can play with animals. I believe our system, our healthcare system, is badly broken, and it's largely because we've lost respect for the body's ability to heal itself. The medical establishment has gotten arrogant. We've come to think that with all of our modern technology and all that we've learned in the past century, that we've mastered nature, and we find it repelling to think that maybe nature could be better than we are sometimes. And yet, spontaneous remissions from incurable diseases are proof that sometimes nature's just better than we are. We need patients to stop thinking that your body is not your business, taking your power and handing it over to other healthcare providers. Your body is your business, and your mind has tremendous power to communicate with your body such that your body can heal itself. Thank you.